Hi everyone, I'm Law of the West, and in this video I'm going to be going over what the differences are between the cutter variants. And so far there are three versions of this ship. The first is the standard starter ship and default model, which is simply called the cutter. The second is the cutter scout, which is focused on reconnaissance and intelligence gathering, while the cutter Rambler has been retrofitted for long hauls and extended trips. And all three of these ships have the same basic interior layout that's been divided up into three separate sections. There's the flight deck, the habitation room, and the cargo bay. And all their flight decks are carbon copies of each other, while their habitation rooms and the cargo bay will differ from ship to ship. The flight deck will have a pilot seat that sits atop a platform at the front of the cutter, and on one wall is a couple of small components lockers, and across from it on the other wall is a weapons rack. Another couple of things that they all have in common is being equipped with two customizable size 2 missile racks that are tucked into a set of bomb bay style doors. And they also have a pair of size 2 weapons that are mounted under the chin of the fuselage. The Rambler and the standard model have the same number of components, while the Scout has some differences that I'll go into more detail about when I talk about that ship. They also carry the rest of their components within cabinets that are recessed into the walls of the cargo bay. And they all have a set of powerful VTOL thrusters that can pivot just like they do on a Cutlass. As I said before, the standard cutter is Drake's contribution to the starter ship category. It's inexpensive, and in my opinion has the most value for the price that you're going to find among any of the non-combat orientated beginning tiered ships. It's light on weapons, but heavy on amenities. Those other ships seem to have either the biggest hab or the largest cargo bay, while the cutter is a nice compromise between the two that splits its cabin space up evenly between those rooms. So the cutter's hab is going to be smaller than the one you'd find on the Rambler, but it's going to be bigger than the one that's in the Scout. It has a shower-bathroom combo. It's got a bed that's set against the wall. It also has a storage locker and some shelving space that we use to store additional items in a more physicalized way. Its cargo bay is bigger than the Ramblers but smaller than the Scouts, and it can be used to carry a modest amount of goods or a vehicle. The maglock grid is big enough to hold 4 SCUs of cargo, which if I'm not mistaken is the largest amount of default cargo that any of the variants can hold. Unstowed cargo is a different story altogether. I've gotten 16 SCUs of cargo into it, but I'd suggest restricting yourself to only using 2 SCU sized boxes, because if you do, you'll be able to stack them in a way that lets you get into and out of the ship. The cutter can carry a variety of different vehicles, which includes the Nox if you park it at an angle. The X1 and all of its variants also fit, although they barely fit, so you might want to angle it in like you would with the Nox. You can also get a quad bike into it. And of course the Pulse fits, but it pretty much fits into nearly everything, so that's not really that big of a surprise. Oddly enough, the only grav lev that can't carry is the Dragonfly. This vehicle is still intended to have a compact mode where it pulls its nacelles in to make it more travel sized, and maybe after they give it that function it'll fit, but for the time being it's not going to happen. It can also carry a bunch of wheeled vehicles like a PTV and an STV, and it can also carry a mule, but it's going to be a bit of a tight fit. The second cutter variant is the Scout. The main thing that sets the Scout apart from the others is a large radar dish that sits dead center on the roof of the ship. This is designed to intensify the abilities of whatever radar component you have installed. The Scout's habitation section is the smallest out of all the three, and still has nearly everything that the standard cutter has, but its interior space has been a lot more streamlined. It has a bed, a storage locker, and a bathroom shower combo, and I like how it maximizes the space. It sacrifices practically nothing in exchange for having more room in the cargo deck. The other variants all have the same components loadout, while the Scout has a few upgrades. Like for instance, it has a size 2 radar cooler and power plant, which is one size bigger than what the others have. The Scout may have the smallest hab section, but it makes up for it by having the largest cargo bay. But weirdly enough, it can only secure 2 SCUs of cargo in it. The Scout can hold a lot more as long as you're okay with hauling some unstowed cargo, and I'd suggest that you don't use anything that's bigger than a 2 SCU size box. The Scout also has the best options when it comes to vehicle transport, and it's the only cutter variant that can technically carry a Dragonfly, but it's not recommended. The hover quad also fits nicely. The Nox can be parked in normally so you don't have to angle it in. You can also get 2 PTVs inside of it. The STV is a nicer fit than you'd find with the other cutters. And that little bit of extra space is all you're going to need to be able to store all of the X1 variants, including the Force and the default X1. You can also get 2 Pulses into it. The Mule also fits with room to spare, and this would be my personal recommendation to use as a ground vehicle for this ship. And that's because the Scout is the only variant that has enough space in its cargo hold for you to be able to fully utilize the Mule's capabilities. And by that I mean you can stow 1 SCU sized box in its boot and another in its outstretched prongs, and that's going to double the amount of stowed cargo that the Scout can hold. Plus it also has a couple of basket mounts that can carry a bunch of small boxes. and so far it's the only vehicle that has climate controlled and an independent life support system and can fit into the back of the Scout. But the main thing that I like about the Scout is that it's going to be able to use that oversized radar dish to detect points of interest that are located well beyond the radar range of other ships of its size. It'll also create a nav point so you can jump directly to them. This is going to be an incredibly important feature for early gameplay, especially for a ship that isn't very keen on fighting. It could help you to avoid unnecessary combat, it could help create escape routes for you, and provide an additional form of income by finding and recording the locations of these POIs. And you could sell that information as a low-risk, high-profit way to make money. The Rambler is the third variant in this series, and it's the Eagle 5 of the Star Citizen universe. It's such a space Winnebago that it should have come with its own barf costume, or at the very least a Lone Star jacket. The Rambler has the smallest cargo deck, but it has the largest hab section out of the three. So if you're interested in having a mobile apartment, then this is going to be the cutter variant for you. The hab section of the Rambler has everything that the other cutters have and then some. It's got physicalized shelf space. It also has an additional foldable drop seat so you can bring a friend along with you. There's a single bed that's been built into a niche along one of the walls. It has a food dispenser that has a look to it that makes me think that you're going to be eating a lot of your meals in paste form, but hey, it's better than nothing. The Rambler even has a small table that you can sit at and enjoy your paste while watching the latest vids on a view screen. There's an items cabinet that could be used to store your goods in a less physicalized way. Along one of the walls you'll find a second weapons rack, because it's Drake, which means that you can never have enough weapon racks. It has an armor locker, and this is something that's going to come in real handy after they place restrictions on what you can wear while flying. And lastly, it has the famous Star Citizen bathroom shower combo, so no more stinky flying for you. The one downside to the Rambler is its cargo bay, but in order to add to something you gotta take away from something else, and the Rambler's cargo bay got the short end of the stick on that deal. But it's still enough to be able to carry 2 SCUs of cargo, and that's a decently sized loot crate. When it comes to vehicle storage, it can carry a hover quad, but the back end is going to be lifted up in the air when you try to close the ramp, so I wouldn't consider that to be a comfortable fit. It can carry a velocity, but not the force or the standard X1 unless you remove its gun. And even without the weapon, it barely fits. And I mean that if it had one more coat of paint, you wouldn't be able to get it in there. It can carry a PTV and an STV, and in my opinion, those are the two most logical choices to use as a ground vehicle for this ship. The Pulse is also a good choice simply because of how small it is. You can't carry a mule, a Nox, or a Dragonfly. And one of my friends wants to use their Rambler as a makeshift hab for their persistent hangar. And if that's what you want to do, or something similar to that, then you couldn't end up picking a better ship. You can also keep the Rambler as a small apartment that you keep on a plot of land that you've purchased, and have it act as a stand-in until you can afford to start building some more permanent structures. I think that the choice between these variants are pretty clear, and there's not much room for ambiguity as to what their intended uses are. The Cutter is a great and expensive ship for non-combat centric players, while the Scout is going to be not only a recon ship, but also a good introduction to the exploration career path that could be a good rival for the Pisces. While the Rambler is the Winnebago of the stars. It's like someone took a hab and strapped a couple of VTOL engines to the side of it and then gave it a pair of guns. And I wholeheartedly approve of this. Well, that's going to be it for this video. I've been your host, Law of the West. Thanks for watching, and take care.